All right, so today is Monday, May 5th. This is the 12:30 p.m. section. It is being recorded. And before we get into the class logistics at the end of the semester, I wanted to start out with a personal thank you to everybody in 443. This semester went a little different than everyone expected, including myself. On February 17th, Monday, I had just finished our 3:30 section, and right around 5 o'clock, as I was walking in the parking lot, I got a call about my transplant, and they said, we need you to be in Charleston, West Virginia by 1 a.m. For your 5:30 surgery tomorrow. And that set off a whole cascading series of events this semester that I appreciate everyone's support, as well as continuing on with the course as we had to move it online. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to visit you in person because one of the things about a transplant is that you become very immunocompromised, and the first 3 months are the most dangerous to be around other people. And so practically what that meant is that even now, I finally returned from West Virginia after 2 months to Maryland on Easter. I was hoping to find a way to come to our class this week, and my doctors were like, absolutely not. So just wanted to say, I'm doing this over video, but this was not the semester I expected. Sure, it wasn't for you. I appreciate you guys hanging in there, doing all the work. From a content side, I don't think we compromise anything in terms of what I would normally be teaching. You got all the assignments, still had access to Bloomberg, and did everything. And from what I can understand, I also want to give a big thank you to the TAs for stepping up. I was monitoring sort of the projects from afar. The presentations were excellent overall, which showed that you guys have been applying and learning the content. So from that, again, just a personal thank you as we wrap up the semester. So let's talk about the end of the semester and kind of where we are. Today, we're going to, primarily the content's over, just review a few things, some logistics, talk about a final extra credit opportunity, and make sure that you're ready for your final presentations on the fourth project on multiples, which is going to be delivered in class on Wednesday. And realistically, what's going to happen, very similar to the last two, is you'll be presenting to the TAs on the rubric that I've provided. And hopefully, because you understand the rubric, you should be in good shape to do very well in those presentations as well. But for many of you, well, actually for all of us, that will be our last in-person class. And again, Wednesday's class is a mandatory attendance day, whether you're presenting or not. So attendance will be taken. And it's very important that you show up to support your teammates, as well as to listen to the other presentations on that day. So that is Wednesday of this week. So it'll be the final time that you'll physically be in Van Munchak Hall 3505 this semester. In terms of other logistics, starting with today, and let me share my screen here. All right, so today, by end of day, and I'm giving you until midnight, you have the opportunity to do the assignment replacement. Okay, so again, that is just a 500-word paper on explaining the difference between the current share price and the target share price that the analysts are putting in Bloomberg, why there is such a gap, and using any of the principles in this class. Now, I've got a few questions about it if you haven't completed it yet, but basically it means you have to talk about an EIC rationale. You can look at historical data. You can look at including ROICs and free cash flows. You can look at anything we've done in evaluation. In fact, somebody said, can I do an as-is valuation? Absolutely. Or you can use the principles of the multiples assignment, but basically to explain why there might be a gap. If you do that paper by the end of day today, then later this week, the TAs will be replacing, so they will choose Now, if you want to recommend to them what they should choose, you're welcome to reach out to them, but they will choose by section what to replace, and I'll talk about that process in just a minute. But if you need to replace an assignment or want to replace an assignment, that is your opportunity. And what the assignment replacement, when replaced, will give you full credit for that assignment, as if, for example, if you missed it, you turned it in by the deadline. So what can be replaced? The assignment replacement can replace any one of these individual homework assignments, 1 through 13. Okay. It can also replace, somebody needed it, didn't do it, the Bloomberg certification. Anybody missed that one? And if you forgot to turn in a peer review by a deadline and got a -1, it could replace that as well. Okay. So the TAs will apply that later this week, but that's what the assignment replacement will replace. What it will not replace is a team project. So any of the 5 team projects, that is separate, and it will not replace an exam. Okay, midterm exam cannot be replaced. So that's what the assignment replacement assignment is for. Again, you have until the end of today to complete it if you choose. Questions about the assignment replacement? Okay. And then the other thing that is due, which I just put up, that is due tomorrow, is what I'm calling your final extra credit point opportunity. It's for 1 more point, and it will be due tomorrow by end of day. Let me see right there, May 6th, 11:59 p.m. You have probably gotten lots of emails to do course feedback. You'll continue to get them. And so here is the carrot that I am giving to all of you. If you do the course evaluation, and I want honest feedback. I mean, if you're pissed off that I wasn't around, go ahead and say it. I did the best I could, but I want you to give whatever feedback you can that is honest about the course, right? And that's what's important, because I do read those and I try and improve. Regardless, I know the university wants that, and we used to get like 70 to 80% participation, but recently it's down to 20 to 30%. Nobody wants to fill out online emails. So here's your opportunity. If you fill out the course evaluation, you can go to this assignment, and it's a true/false question that basically says, on your honor, you filled out the course evaluation. And if you do, you get 1 final extra credit point towards your semester grade. That's it. That's all you got to do. Fill out the course evaluation at some time between now and end of day tomorrow, and come here, say you certify that you did it, and you get 1 point towards your semester grade. Very easy. True/false question, right? And that will be available between now and tomorrow at midnight.
Professor.
So that is the last extra credit opportunity that I will give this semester. So if you're looking for anything, now's the time to take advantage. I want to remind you that when we do grading, we do not round up to the next point. Okay. So for example, if you want to get an A in this class, you need 93 total points. If your grade is 92.5 or 92.75, that will be an A-. We will not round that up to an A. So this is another opportunity for those of you that are worried about rounding or very close to another grade to get a final point. Okay. And that would put us, I believe, at 105 total points for this semester, which means there's been 5 extra credit points, including this final extra credit point opportunity. So don't come to me after you take the final exam and say, Professor Perfetti, I am 1 point away from getting whatever grade that I want, because I'll say this was the last opportunity to do so. So your last opportunity to improve your grade are this: do the course evaluation, fill out the true/false question, and the assignment replacement. We won't be able to extend that deadline past today for the assignment replacement, past tomorrow to certify that you did the course evaluation. Questions about that? Somebody says, is it published yet? Should be. It should be published. I did that right before the class.
Whenever I click on the final extra credit point opportunity, it just says no preview.
So let's talk again about the rest of the week. So in terms of assignments, today, assignment replacement, end of day. Tomorrow, final extra credit opportunity, right? Then we have down here, you have your group case multiples presentation, which will be during your class time, similar to the last 3 presentations that you'll make on multiples on Wednesday, starting with the 11 a.m. section. Again, you'll have 10 minutes to present your company plus 3 others that you have chosen, which means 4 total companies. You'll do that in a PowerPoint. You would have also submitted all of the supporting screenshots, which means at a minimum, you're going to probably do, if you did the EEO, and you can shrink the EEO screen so that it shows the ROEs, the EEO, the WAC, and the GUID, if you used it, times 4 companies, that's 12 screenshots. Make sure you submit those screenshots and put them in the PowerPoint, or at least put them in the uploaded file next to the PowerPoint, but probably in the PowerPoint so you can refer to those. And make sure that you cover, and I'll show you the rubric in a second, everything that's on the rubric for group case multiples. I'd like to see 6 teams get 10 out of 10 in every section. That would make me very happy from the grading perspective. And then that is Wednesday, which for all intents and purposes will be your last physical day in class for 443. Okay. The other thing that will happen is that approximately 5 p.m. on May 7th, the Bloomberg Trading Challenge for the second half of the semester will end. So again, don't liquidate your portfolios. Don't go above $300,000 worth of cash, and make sure that you've done at least 10 longs to make sure that you're not disqualified. So again, just assume that you're continuing trading beyond that date. I will post screenshots later that day. As soon as I take them, make an announcement, you'll see the screenshots, see the final rankings, and then we'll put in the grades. So 2 things are ending on Wednesday, the Bloomberg Trading Challenge for the second half, and your final presentation on multiples. And again, by the end of the multiples presentation, every member of your team should have presented. Okay, so if you haven't presented yet, you should be presenting on Wednesday. Okay, 10 minutes, and again, we'll talk about the rubric in a second. There are 2 more peer reviews to be completed this week. Okay, they are both going to be due earlier in the week. The first one is the peer review for the multiples. You'll notice that the deadline is Wednesday. Okay, normally it's a few days after the presentation, but because of the end of the semester, your peer review is due Wednesday. So you might even want to put the peer review in before the presentations are over, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Need them in. The other same thing is for the Bloomberg Trading Challenge. There's a peer review for the Bloomberg Trading Challenge covering both halves of the semester. That is due on Wednesday by 5 p.m. So you got 2 peer reviews that have to be finished up by Wednesday. Okay, and that is very important, right? So we can quickly score them if necessary. And finally, the reason why that works, Trading Challenge ends Wednesday, final presentations Wednesday, 2 peer reviews Wednesday, right? Because Thursday is finished grading day. So between myself and the TAs, all the rest of the grades will be graded and submitted to ELMS by end of day Thursday of this week, okay? Which basically means you have a pretty good idea of your grade at the end of the semester by looking at the total points. All right, remember ELMS is a little misleading in the grade book. So if you just take out the total points across everything, add them all up, whatever it adds to is the grade. So it's not a percentage of the total. So out of all the points to get an A in this class, you'll need 93. To get an A minus in this class, you'll need 90. B plus is 87, etc. Okay. The only grade that is non-standard for the normal distribution is A plus. Because I've given 5 points of extra credit, 97 will not be an A plus. A plus will probably be somewhere between 100 and 102. I'm just going to look at where the distribution ends up in the class. Okay, so all the points will be put in for all the assignments by end of day Thursday. And the reason why that's important is because either by the end of day Thursday or early Friday morning, once all the points are put in, then the assignment replacement will be applied by each of your TAs. Okay? And what the TAs are going to do is they're going to download the gradebook to Excel. And they're going to look for either the lowest grade of something you missed, either a 0 or -1 that has the most points, and that's what they're going to replace. One assignment will be replaced. Or if you've done every assignment and did the assignment replacement, they're going to look for the biggest opportunity to give you the most points. Let's say there's a 3-point assignment, you got a 1 on it, it's the only one that was low, you'll get the 2 points back. Okay. But basically the assignment replacements can either be applied after all the points and grades are in on Thursday night, or early Friday morning, such that by Friday at lunchtime, each of the TAs will make an announcement telling you that you can check to see whether you're eligible to opt out for the final exam. So once on either Thursday night or Friday morning, the assignment replacement and all the grades are in, the TAs will then apply the opt-out criteria by section. Okay. And so essentially, if you're able to opt out, what will happen is they will put 10 points into this assignment, final exam opt-out points. If you cannot opt out, it will say 0. Okay, so for the vast majority of you, it says 0 right now. So it doesn't matter what it says now, it matters after the announcement midday Friday. So Friday, the TAs will say, check your final exam opt-out points for your section. And again, if you see 10 points, you do not have to take the final exam. You're done with the class. So Wednesday, for all intents and purposes, is your last class. If after the announcement is made, you see a 0 under final exam opt-out points, then you have to take the final exam. The final exam will be Monday, 1 week from today, May 12th, kind of like the midterm, during your regularly scheduled class time. All right, so for those of you on the video right now, if you're registered for the 12:30 section, you would take the final exam between 12:30 and 2. If you're in the 11 o'clock section, 11 and 12:30, etc. It will be very similar to the midterm exam. It will be 10 multiple choice questions. It will be scored as soon as you hit submit for up to 10 points, 0 to 10 points. And again, it's an open book, open notes exam, covering, and usually exams are not supposed to be cumulative, but I don't know how not to make it cumulative, but focusing on valuation and multiples, but nonetheless, key value drivers, for example, we've been talking about since day 1. So it's basically covering the content of the semester with a focus on valuation and multiples. But it's a multiple choice exam, open book, open notes, no collaboration. And that's the thing. You can take the exam anywhere you have internet access. So if you want to take in your dorm, you want to take in the library, you want to take in 3505, feel free. But basically, you need to take it during your regular class time. The only exception is if you have an ADS accommodation. If you have an ADS accommodation, the exam will open at 8 a.m. and close for you at midnight, and you have to take the exam according to your accommodation sometime on Monday, May 12th. Okay. So for a lot out there, kind of end of semester logistics, but basically as of Monday, if you take the exam by end of day Monday, you'll know your final total point score, which will be a letter grade. If you've opted out of the final exam, you'll know by Friday your final point score, which will translate to a letter grade. Okay, which basically means I'll give a day for anybody to say May 13th, any issues that you have, let me know with anything. And then on May 14th, I will submit the letter grades to UMEG per what I told you earlier. But again, you're going to know your letter grades essentially either Friday or Monday of the week coming. Okay. So questions, we check the chat. Spirit said they're trying to ask me questions and I'm not hearing it. So hold on, let me check my sound. Oh, that's why. Select speaker. Sorry, I had the wrong speaker selected. Switch this. Let me switch the speaker while I'm sharing. Frozen. Go anywhere. The computer seems to be freezing up on. Zoom. I have to quit and come back in. So don't go anywhere. All right. I don't know why Zoom has completely freaked out here. But if you can you at least hear my audio? Can you hear my audio? Just somebody give me some thumbs up or thumbs down. If you can hear my audio. Hold on. You can hear me. All right. Unfortunately, I think you can hear me, but I can't hear you. And I don't know why it is telling me that it's lost my speaker. So my apologies. So can you put your questions in the chat? And unfortunately, it's the only way I'm going to be able to answer them right now because my Zoom never had this problem before. They allow me to get to the chat. This is weird. All right, let's go back to the chat. Hearing some sound. Did somebody say something? Might have got some sound working here.
Hello.
Okay. All right. I got the sound working again. All right. So sorry about all this technical difficulties. Whoever was trying to ask me the question earlier, can you ask it again? All right. Well, while we're waiting on that, I'm looking at the chat. Somebody said that if we opt out of the final exam, would we get 10 points? The answer is yes, but you do not choose to opt out of the final exam. We will tell you if you're eligible to opt out of the final exam. And so if you're eligible, we'll give you the 10 points. And no one's ever turned it down. No one said, no, I don't want to opt out. I want to take the final exam. So if you're eligible to opt out, we will put 10 points in. You don't have to take the final exam. You get the 10 points. If you are not eligible to opt out, you'll have 0 points, which means you'll have to take the final exam for up to 10 points on Monday. And you will find that out midday Friday. Somebody also asked about the assignment replacement. It's not required for the final opt-out. No, it is not. The assignment replacement is just a benefit to you that says if I missed an assignment or for some reason I wasn't happy with the grading on an individual assignment other than the exam, you have the opportunity to get points back. Somebody also asked in the chat, does the assignment replacement cover a missed peer review? Yes, it can. It can cover a missed peer review. It'll take the -1 back to a 0 and treat it as if you submitted the peer review. In terms of the open TA spots, there will be multiple, probably 3. So again, I posted, and I didn't talk about this yet, but since they're mentioning it now, so in the fall, the intention is to be fully back in person. And just as we had 4 TAs this semester, and again, I'm meeting with them tonight about our final logistics and giving them personal thank yous for really stepping up this semester. And I hope they were helpful to you as well in my medical absence. But my plan is to be fully back in person in the fall semester. And we have 4 undergraduate TAs. And again, one of the things about this class is that the TAs come from this class. So basically, if you're registered, you can't have graduated, but in the fall, then it pays $17 an hour times 10 hours a week. You have an office in the 4th floor, which you're sharing for office hours. And again, as you've seen with these TAs, they are generally responsible for the individual grading. Next semester, I plan on being physically there for the presentations. But this semester, as I said, wonderful TAs have been following the rubric and have done the grading. So if you're interested in that, submit basically just your resume and something that says why you want to be a TA for full 43. And as long as you have an A- in the class, I'll be talking to you in the next week or so and let you know pretty quickly if you're interested and the confirmed spots for the fall. Didn't see any other questions. So let me just talk about a couple last things, and then I want to review some content. So going back to the rubric. I made an announcement over the weekend on the grading rubric for Wednesday. So this is the same thing that will be used to assign your grade. So the grade is worth 10 points, okay? And the way the points are broken out is there's 3 sections. The P to E analysis section is worth 4 points. The EV to EBIT analysis section is worth 4 points. And the EV to revenue section is worth 2 points. And as you can see here in the rubric, you're picking 3 other companies, so 4 total, and you got to do the premium or discount against each of those 3 companies. Okay, each of the 3 PEs, each of the 3 EV to EBITs, each of the 3 EV to revenues. And you have to cover all 3 drivers. So what that means for PE is that you got to talk about the return on equity, you got to talk about the cost of equity, and you got to talk about the G, so spread and growth. And if the discount rate is driving the multiple, you got to say that too. Same thing with EV to EBIT. The difference is there's 4 drivers because it's, you got to talk about the growth, you got to talk about the tax rate, you got to talk about the ROIC, and you got to talk about the WACC. And again, premium or discount using those 4 drivers against all 3 peers. For EV to revenue, you got to cover the drivers. Most of it can probably be explained by the margins, but if not, then you have to go beyond the margins, talk about differences in cost of capital and or productivity. Okay, but again, you got to do it against each of the companies. You got to refer to numbers. You can't be general and vague. You can't just say this company's trading at a discount and move on. You got to use specific numbers, and you got to have some real world context. Why is your company trading at a premium or discount? What's going on in the real world? So a couple sentences about that somewhere in your presentation. Okay. Now, what the TAs are also going to be looking for is reasonableness. And what I mean by that is the biggest thing for reasonableness is going to be about the G. Okay. We've talked about that in the last assignment when we were doing the companies that we had to kind of adjust the G and or the spread. But same thing, remember, you're doing a perpetuity. You're not doing a last year. All right. And so if the next few years don't look like perpetuity, then that's got to be put into your analysis. Just as an example, if I gave you Boeing, okay, Boeing hasn't made money in 5 years, they're not expected to make money in the next 3 years. Okay. So if you use last year's ROIC for Boeing, you understand their share price because the market's not looking at the last 5 years or the next 3. The market's looking very long term for Boeing, which they actually see as a bright future once they get their problems behind them. And so the G and the spread is what they would assume long term, which is not having to do with what they're doing even in the short term for the company. So there'd have to be some adjustments for that. So when we say unreasonable G, if you're doing your analysis and you see a G of like negative 10%, unless that company's heading out of business, that's not reasonable. Can you explain negative 1% or 2%? Sure, we did that with Target, right? But you're not going to explain a giant negative G. So if you have one for one of your companies, first thing I would say is, since I'm giving you the choice of which companies outside of your own to do the analysis on, pick companies that are easier for you that require less adjustment as much as possible. But if you do have to make an adjustment, be clear on it and make sure that you have a story to support it. Okay. So the final thing is the screenshots. Like any other assignment, you got to have your screenshots to support where your data comes from. So 12 screenshots are very important to the presentation. And this is a mandatory attendance day. Okay. So make sure you're there, sign the attendance sheet, whether you're presenting or not, and don't be disruptive. Right? And I think we haven't had that issue happen this semester. So I commend you for that. One more class to sit through. Okay, so that's the grading rubric that we're using for Wednesday. Any questions about that rubric? Or what is expected as of Wednesday for grading? Somebody asked, can the assignment replacement be spread across multiple assignments? The answer is no. The assignment replacement can only replace one assignment. And even if you don't get a full point back, like let's say, as I said in the chat to me, they get like 1.75 out of 2 and get 0.25 for that. You can't take the other points and apply it to something else. So the assignment replacement only replaces one assignment. So this is the rubric we're going to use for grading on Wednesday. As I said, hopefully everybody does a good job. Mind your time. Make sure you cover everything in the 10 minutes and talk about the premiums or discounts. All right. So final thing I want to cover is just kind of a review of some of the things that we've been going through this semester. So I know it's been kind of a long 3 months, and hopefully you have some kind of key takeaways. And then I also want to do a final review of the Bloomberg Trading Challenge, right? But in terms of content in the lecture notes, 4 sections of the class, we started out back in January around the concept of the 4 cornerstones, which we've been applying in this class, which are universal even beyond the class. And I think at this point, you clearly understand the importance of spread, and you clearly understand the importance of cash flow. And I think this class, probably more than anything else you've taken at Smith, helps you understand the importance of expectations. It's been a privilege for us as a school to give you access to Bloomberg, because unfortunately, in the real world, or even at other colleges, people don't have access to this tool. It's a very expensive tool. It's a pro tool. It's what Wall Street uses. And understanding expectations is really critical to the marketplace. It's one of the reasons why I give you the Bloomberg Trading Challenge, because it kind of forces you to understand those expectations and how companies perform against those expectations. It's really, really critical. And we also have the importance of competitive advantage. Knowing that things don't last forever is also very insightful. Industries do not maintain their returns forever. Companies do not maintain their returns forever. And do you have a what's next? As you read about disruption in the real world in the papers and news and podcasts and TV shows, companies that get disrupted are the ones that failed to understand that 4th cornerstone. Understand that over time, they have to constantly reinvent themselves. They have to constantly think about what's next. And they kind of focus on what they do. And when the market moves away and they don't have something to follow it up with, then they really should. And they also don't see the emerging companies that are coming out of the new market opportunities that will eventually become bigger threats to them. And I think we illustrated that in many of our examples, but nonetheless, those were the 4 cornerstones. And the other thing that was pretty universal is the key value drivers. Again, that goes well beyond this class. These are the most important drivers of value for a company, right? And it's not just ROIC against cost of capital, but as we saw in the historical section, it's the margin and the balance sheet productivity. How much you're spending, because that's the return on investment to generate sales or revenue, the risk, the growth, and the ability to sustain the growth and to sustain that spread. That's key value drivers. We also told you, and again, this is pretty universal to remember, that half the performance is going to be the industry. And when you see really tough industries, it's hard for companies to make money. And you have no further to look right now than what's going on with the Trump tariffs, right? When he's put tremendous tariffs on, for example, the auto industry, it's really put some of these companies into spirals because their costs are going up dramatically. And sure, there was a surge of car buying in advance of the tariffs, but customers that suddenly looked at $60,000 cars are going to cost $80,000 are going to buy that car. And that's going to cause lots of problems in the auto industry in the next 6 months, right? And it doesn't matter who you are, you're facing that challenge. So that's the point. Industries matter. Now, if you watched on Saturday, they live streamed the Berkshire Hathaway final meeting. And at the end, Warren Buffett, who's 94 years old, surprised everybody in a way that should have surprised. He's retiring at the end of the year. And, named the Jane guy to become the CEO of Berkshire. But what they both said in the Q&A period is there was a question about these Japanese companies that they own. They said, well, how long are you looking to own them? And they both said forever. And the perspective is they understand that if you can find an attractive industry, not just today, but over a long period of time, that's going to help from an investment standpoint. And the companies they pick are the ones they think are going to be the winners in those attractive markets. So that's been their investment philosophy. That's something that I've shared with you. And I think that's something to remember even well beyond this class, because those are the things that are going to matter. Are you in a good industry today and tomorrow? And do you have some sort of advantage that allows you to outperform everybody in those industries today and tomorrow? And that set up the basis for EIC, okay? Which was really applying the key value drivers equation. We went through the four scenarios of the key value drivers. Right? That was the equation that we developed. We said you can either think of yourself as on a treadmill, you can think of yourself as a star, kind of applying BCG. You can think of a company as a cash cow, or you can think of a company as a black hole, right? And that's the whole point. Like, where are you in the position, and how do you think about it on a go forward basis? Because they have different senses of value. And so, not that the past repeats the future, we're going to understand the environment that you're in. So that was the EIC framework. We had to understand the economy and what's going on. We had to understand the industry conditions and what's going on in company. And this semester, more than others, illustrated the importance of macroeconomic data. I mean, you see the headlines even today that interest rates are having a huge impact on the economy, and what's happening with the cost of the debt and the cost of government borrowing. This is really affecting a lot of different things. Matter of fact, it's driving Trump to pull back on some of his tariffs, because the potential inflationary pressure is actually not lowering long-term interest rates. So it's not the Fed, which controls short-term interest rates, it's long-term interest rates that are going to matter. Because if nothing else, we're running a $2 trillion a year budget deficit. We can all understand in 2025, 2026, and you got to borrow money to fund it. And if you're borrowing money at 4 or 5%, then the budget deficit gets even bigger versus when you were borrowing money at 3 or 4%. So that, more than anything else, is going to drive a lot of things about the economy going forward. What happens with interest rates? And that's going to affect a lot of companies and other economic data, whether it's the price of oil. And right now we're seeing challenges with consumer confidence, which are leading indicators. Industry is what's happening in your industry. And then company was competitive advantage. And we did some exercises around that. But I was just going to try and quickly log into Bloomberg to remind you of a few things. And while I'm logging in, I also want to remind you about Bloomberg Access. So in terms of Bloomberg, and somebody said, can I show the standings? So yes, when I get into Bloomberg, we'll look at the standings. Technically, you can use Bloomberg even when you're no longer taking this class, whether you graduated or whether you are, a senior next year taking different classes. The deal is that as long as you log into your Bloomberg account at least once every 30 days, that account stays active. And if you call Bloomberg, and let's say you were not active within a 30-day period of time, and Bloomberg is now choosing to upgrade my software in the middle of logging in, so I might have to come back to this. Then you can call and have it reactivated. Now you have to be in the lab at one of our terminals to have your account reactivated, or you can just create a new account in the lab. But nonetheless, priority goes to 443 students in the lab. But nonetheless, if you want to continue using Bloomberg after this class, you do have access as long as you come back to 35. Okay. And again, you can either use your account if you've been logging in, particularly if you're taking classes around campus next semester, or again, even if you graduated, come back to the lab from time to time and just class. But do remember the rules of Flight Club, because you don't want the floodgates opening on who is doing it, because we're going to have another 190 students next semester, and they really do need to have kind of priority to using Bloomberg. Finishing my login now that it's finished its upgrade. All right, so when we think about EIC, one of the screens that we talked about way back when was ECFC. And I also told you that ECSU was another helpful screen to understand what's kind of going on just in general in the macroeconomic environment. So let me go ahead and try and reshare my screen. So ECF. C is the economic forecast. And as of today, probability of recession, 40%. That's higher than it was earlier in the semester. And you can see people are still potentially thinking the GDP this year will squeak back positive. But if you did see last week, that GDP went negative for the first quarter, negative 0.3%. So right now, and you can see one of the things that's driving GDP negative is the cuts in government spending. And the other thing is imports have been a big role in that as well, because people are trying to import a bunch of stuff in advance of the tariffs, which is really driving up our trade deficit. But you can also see the CPI not hitting the 2% target of the Fed anytime soon. And that's the tension you're seeing right now between Trump and the Fed, because he wants interest rates lowered. And they said that they're not going to lower them unless they think inflation's under control. And inflation is not going to be spiking dramatically. It might spike in the short term, but even so, we're not going back to the low inflation days we had pre-COVID, is what the market's currently expecting today. Also, you can see that housing is going to really suffer this year, which is already starting to do. The other thing is ECSU was the surprise index. Keep ECS. Keyboard's not working. Nothing with. And if you remember, we talked about the 5 buckets of, or 6 buckets of how we're doing against expectations. The big one is right here in the surveys. Okay? And this is where consumer confidence tends to land from both the conference board as well as Michigan. And right now we're seeing very low ratings on both of those, and those are considered leading indicators. So whereas household industrial labor is a lagging indicator, right? And so this is why people are worried about what's going to happen in the next 6 to 9 months in the economy, because if businesses stop spending because they're worried about the future, and consumers stop spending because they're worried about the future, it's going to drag these other indicators down, and that's where the potential recession comes in. Okay? So consumer sentiment has a big impact at the economic level, and unfortunately, that's the one that's had the biggest negative surprises. People are just afraid, and that's not good for the economy overall, right? And then we talked about 5 forces for the industry, and then we talked about competitive advantage for the company. All right, and this is where we introduced Bloomberg. So let's go ahead and do a quick Bloomberg check on the trading challenge, because a lot of Bloomberg this semester included quickly section 101. Good news, everybody's under 300,000. Everybody's made the 10 longs. And so it looks like, unless something dramatic happens, C. Saunders in this class is likely to be our winner on Wednesday. But the fight for second, third, fourth place still is a fight, right? And that is section 101. Section 201, which is this section. Again, everybody's under 300,000, everybody's on their 10 longs. This one is going down to the wire on who gets first place. So 2 more days to go. These 2 teams are fairly close together. There's only about $4,000 separating first and second place. And section 301. Everybody's under 300,000. One team needs to make 10 longs. So the K coil team, it's Kevin, remember correctly, buy something, anything. Okay. Between now and Wednesday. I'd hate to see you disqualified for not meeting the 10 long criteria. So you need to buy and trade at least one more equity stock. But nonetheless, very close otherwise between first and second place here between now and Wednesday. And then for section 401, these teams are under 300,000. Everybody's made the 10 longs. Looks like this team's got a pretty good lead going into 2 more days left, but still relatively close for second, third, and fourth place. And again, team, because we had a disqualification, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is the grade distribution in this section. The other sections, it's 5, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. Second and third place get 4 points. And again, not just EIC, but then we got into historical analysis. And historical analysis was really 2 things. It was the ROIC trees and it was the CFIs. And by the way, those ROIC trees are universal. They go beyond this class. So if you're trying to do benchmarking, you're trying to do historical competitive analysis, those are very useful to understand the drivers, particularly how the company's been doing over time, as well as company against peers. The third section of our class was on valuation, and we built out models, which we reused constantly in the semester. And the one thing I would just remind you about these valuation models is I still get emails from former students asking for updates to the model. Some of them work at as a sell-side analyst at some of the Wall Street firms. So the model that you built is real. It's actually very similar to a real sell-side model. The major difference is that the level of granularity that they'll go into. So for example, we are forecasting revenue as a top line. If you're a sell-side analyst, then you drill down and you forecast by either major products or by divisions. So for example, when we're looking at drug companies, you forecast by drug. If you go to Starbucks, then you're going to forecast the average price of coffee. You're going to do the price of the food, how much food they, how much product they sell, average price of the product, the margins on that. But it all adds up to the same total that we've done. So we went through the enterprise DCF, and the other thing is we did 4 models, right? We did an as is, we did a bull, we did a bear, we did a target. And the bull and the bear, and again, you can see it today, is very, very important because understanding volatility, understanding where a company could end up and what its long-term value is very important. In fact, to go back to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting on Saturday, Warren Buffett, who's been sitting on the sidelines with now $347 billion of cash at Berkshire Hathaway, has been looking to pounce on companies that are hurt short-term by the sell-off in the marketplace that are still long-term companies that are very good markets and industries. And so you're probably going to see him get into the M&A mode, or Jane, his successor, in the next year, buying the undervalued companies. It's usually his modus operandi. When everybody else is selling, he's looking to buy. Okay? But the whole idea is it's the long-term value. And you understand the drivers of long-term value, you understand the forecast of them, and you kind of understand some upside downside. We did a lot of practice on that, which led us to the 4th part of the class, which is multiples. And multiples are just rearranged DCF. So again, just remember this, that if ROIC is a proxy for free cash flow, multiples are just the proxy for free cash flow valuation. It's the shortcut. It's the same key value drivers we use in continuing value. We're just not forecasting 5 or 6 years before going to continuing value. We're just starting continuing value today. But the thing that I'll remind you of, which will help you hopefully in your Wednesday presentations, is that remember, you're doing the continuing value for the company's ROIC for the next 50 years, the company's growth rate for the next 50 years, the company's long-term WACC, okay, for the next 50 years. So the point is, multiples are growth and spread for the very long term, right? We're trying to estimate what we think that is, right? And unfortunately, sometimes, as I said, today's return It's not the long-term one the market's using. Sometimes to the growth rate, it's not the long. And ultimately, we have to recognize that. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, right? And unfortunately, that's where you're going to have to use judgment. And that's going to apply on Wednesday as well. That's why I put in the rubric an unreasonable G, right? So just because a company has a solution to a G doesn't mean it's the right one. You're going to kind of step back. And that's why I use storytelling. Finance is probably more storytelling than a lot of people realize. That's why I make you write the papers. And I know you probably didn't like writing as much as you had to. Like, I'm a finance major. I like solving equations. Great. But those assumptions that you put in and that understanding that context not only helps you in this class, it will differentiate you in the real world. Like when you get your early jobs and you're competing against other students that didn't have to do this, never had to worry about the context, never had to think about the types of assumptions, and can't communicate with senior leaders about why they did the math they did, you will stand out. And it is a skill set that will help you advance your careers much faster than a lot of other people who just know how to solve an equation. So I know sometimes you probably were pretty unhappy and you're like pissed off. It's like, why is the professor making me do this? Why is he being such a hard ass on all this stuff? Because I actually think it's going to make you better, right? And that was always the intent on what we're going to do. I also was very tough on deadlines. And you think I'm tough on deadlines, wait till you go work for your firms that you work for, okay? Because they're going to be just as tough, if not more. The consequence is much higher. My toughness on deadlines is, oh, I'm sorry, you're not going to get 2 points. Theirs is literally, you might lose your job. Just remember that. A couple more things popped up here in the chat. If we graduated, do you know if we'll be able to log into the computers in the lab? So that's what I was saying earlier. Technically, yes, because if you're in the lab, we assume that you're a current student. So anybody in the lab has access to Bloomberg. And as long as you have an account, so it's either your current account, which you can reactivate, or another account. Remember, when you sign up for Bloomberg, you even don't need to use an UMD email. The only thing you needed the UMD email for was the Bloomberg certification. Like you can use a Gmail to sign up for a Bloomberg account, but it has to be done in the lab. As I said, a few things. Request number one, don't tell everybody about that. I don't need 5,000 people descending on the Bloomberg lab here. And number two, respect the people that are actually taking the class first. So don't show up in the middle of the class, mine or somebody else's. And so again, it's kind of like when the lab's available, you're welcome to be in there and take advantage of that. And then somebody else also asked, does our grade in the Bloomberg Trading Challenge affect our ability to opt out of the final exam? No asterisks. So the Bloomberg Trading Challenge, because by definition, it's a forced ranking, I'm not going to penalize a team that didn't do well in the trading challenge from being able to opt out of the final exam. So it does not apply to the opt-out criteria, with the exception of peer reviews. If you are peer reviewed down on any group project, right, including the Bloomberg Trading Challenge, you have to take the final exam, and that will be in there. In fact, there were a few peer reviews, which I did have to reduce a student's grade. And essentially what will happen is if that was you, or could be you, hopefully it isn't at this point, then I'll give you the percentage that were given to me of the people that peer reviewed you, and I'll do a weighted average of all the members of your team except yourself. And then that will be your grade. And then in the final exam opt-out points, I put a comment that said, you have to take the final exam because of this peer review on this assignment. And that includes the Bloomberg Trading Challenge. Otherwise, the Bloomberg Trading Challenge as a group project does not affect the final exam opt-out. So let me tell you what does. Right? You had to do all of the individual assignments on time, right, without getting zeros on them, and you need at least a 50% score. So 1 out of 2 on almost every other assignment. Okay. Secondly, had to do Bloomberg certification. Right. Third, you can't have a missed peer review of a -1. Okay. And you can't be sent to the honor council. This semester I didn't have to send anybody to the honor council. So thank you for being honorable students with integrity. And finally, you can't have the negative peer reviews on any assignment. So that's the criteria, which is actually written in the syllabus, that's going to be applied either late Thursday night or Friday morning by the TAs. And then once the criteria is there, if you have questions about it, reach out, because I'm asking the TAs as we apply the criteria to put in the comments, if you can't opt out, what's causing you not to be able to opt out. And if you think we made a mistake, and we did sometimes do, then we will correct mistakes. But at this point, you also know that from a grading standpoint, we won't change assignments that are already submitted, and we can't accept things past deadlines. So that still holds true even as we're doing our final. All right, well, again, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties today, and I want to end where we started. Thank you. I know you guys put in a lot of effort this semester. I know it was not ideal that we couldn't physically meet in Van Munching Hall. I hope that it did not compromise learning in any way. You didn't get anything that other semesters got in terms of content. It's all the same. And I know we did some of it virtually, and hopefully in the fall, we're returning in person. As I said, from an extra credit standpoint, please, if you're going to take the assignment replacement, do that by today. If you want the final extra credit point, please do the course evaluation by tomorrow and certify that you did it with the true false question. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to myself or the TAs. I'll be monitoring, can't physically be in 3505, but I'll be monitoring your presentations virtually. And like I said, I hope I see 10 out of 10s from every group, and I appreciate what you did, and hopefully you learned it. So if somebody has any other questions, happy to stick around. Otherwise, best of luck, and look forward to Wednesday's presentations.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Should we submit screenshots for the assignment replacement as well?
If you're referring to data, it's like every other assignment. So yes, you absolutely should.
Okay, right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.